The girl was sitting on the curb outside my garage, trying not to cry while pretending she knew how to change a tire. Her hands were shaking. The lug nuts would not move. Cars passed. No one stopped. I almost did not either. People usually do not expect much from a single dad who runs a small mechanic shop at the edge of town. Grease on his hands, old truck, quiet life. But I saw the way she kept looking at her phone like she was afraid to call someone, so I walked over. I did not know that helping her would cost me contracts, my reputation, and almost my business. And I did not know her mother was already preparing to make me regret it. Most mornings, I unlock the garage before the sun fully rises. The street is quiet at that hour. The bakery across the road does not open until 7. The traffic light at the corner blinks yellow. I like those first few minutes before engines start and phones begin ringing. It feels honest. My shop is small. 2 service bays, 1 hydraulic lift that works when it wants to, a faded sign with my last name above the door. I painted it myself 5 years ago when I signed the lease. People in town know me, but not in a way that draws attention. They come when their cars make a sound they do not understand. They come when something leaks or shakes or refuses to start. I explain what is wrong. I fix it. I charge what is fair. I do not talk much. It is easier that way. After my wife died, silence became normal. Grief changes the volume of everything. At first, people brought food and advice and sympathy. Over time, that faded. What stayed was routine. I wake up at 5. I make breakfast for my son. He is 9. He eats slowly and asks careful questions. He does not remember his mother the way I do, but he feels her absence in small ways. When school has events for parents, he watches the other families without saying anything. I pack his lunch. I drive him to school. I tell him I will pick him up at 3:30 unless I call. I never call unless I have to. The garage keeps us steady. Not comfortable, not struggling beyond control, just steady. There is pride in that. I do not owe anyone favors. I do not take shortcuts. If something costs more than expected, I show the customer the damaged part. I explain why. Some believe me immediately. Some look skeptical until they understand. Trust builds slowly in a town like this. It is not loud. It does not come with praise. It comes with returning customers and quiet referrals. Go to him, people say. He will not cheat you. That matters. But being dependable does not make you important. It just makes you useful. There is a difference. I learned early not to insert myself into other people's business. Arguments between couples, disputes over money. Angry phone calls in the parking lot. I fix the car. I hand back the keys. I step away. My son sometimes sits in the small office at the back after school. He does homework at the desk while I work on engines. He likes the smell of oil and metal. He says it feels real. I understand what he means. Machines do not lie. If something is broken, there is a reason. You find it. You fix it. The problem does not pretend to be something else. People are not like that. Still, I try to assume the best. If someone is late on payment, I give them time. If someone seems embarrassed about money, I lower the labor cost without announcing it. I know what it feels like to calculate every expense before sleeping. No one in town would describe me as ambitious. I do not chase expansion. I do not attend business mixers. I do not compete with the larger dealerships on the highway. They have glass buildings and coffee machines in the waiting area. I have a worn couch and a fan that rattles in summer. But my customers return. That is enough. On weekends, I clean the shop myself. I reorganize tools. I check invoices. I sit in the office after my son goes to bed and review the week's numbers. Some months are thin. Some are steady. I do not expect sudden changes. Stability is something I guard carefully. Trust, to me, is simple. If someone needs help and I can give it, I do. If someone speaks, I listen. If someone looks lost on the side of the road, I stop. There is no calculation behind it. No strategy, just habit. That afternoon, when I noticed the teenage girl sitting on the curb with a flat tire and shaking hands, it did not feel like a decision. It felt like routine. I did not know her name. I did not ask many questions. I changed the tire. I told her to drive slowly until she could replace it. I refused her attempt to pay me because it took 10 minutes and cost nothing. Then I went back to the garage. To me, it was small. Ordinary, the kind of thing that disappears by the next morning. At that point, my life still felt predictable, honest, contained within the size of my shop and the distance between school pickup and closing time. I believed that if I kept my head down and worked hard, nothing outside that circle could reach us. I was wrong. But I did not know that yet. The next morning felt normal until it did not. I had just rolled up the front shutter when I noticed the SUV. It was parked across the street, engine still running. Black, polished. The kind of vehicle that never seems dusty no matter the road. It did not belong to this part of town. Most of my customers drove older sedans or work trucks with scratches along the doors. The SUV stayed there longer than necessary. I told myself I was imagining things. At 8:15, it pulled slowly into my lot. I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped forward. The driver's door opened first. A man in a suit stepped out, glanced around the property, then opened the rear passenger door. She stepped out carefully. Tall, composed, dressed in a pale gray coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her posture was straight in a way that suggested practice. She did not look at the shop first. She looked at me. There was no visible anger in her expression. That unsettled me more. "Are you the owner?" she asked. Her voice was even, controlled. "Yes," I said. "How can I help you?" "My daughter mentioned you assisted her yesterday." The word assisted sounded heavier than it should have. I nodded. "Flat tire, it was quick." She studied my face as if comparing it to something she had already decided. "She was alone." "Yes, and you approached her." "She was struggling with the lug nuts. I asked if she needed help." Silence stretched between us. The suited driver remained near the vehicle, watching without appearing to watch. "My daughter is 17, she said. I did not ask her age. "That is not the point." I waited. The air felt different, thicker, not hostile, just measured. "She was very distressed when she came home," the woman continued. "She felt embarrassed, vulnerable." "I kept it professional," I said carefully. "Change the tire, that is all." "I am sure you believe that." It was the first sentence that carried something sharper beneath it. "I have security cameras," I added, though I was not sure why I felt the need to say it. Her eyes shifted briefly toward the building, then back to me. "I hope so," she replied. There was a faint smile. It did not reach her eyes. "I am very protective of my daughter," she said. "You understand?" "Yes." She stepped closer, lowering her voice slightly. "In situations like this, perception matters more than intention." I did not answer immediately. I was not certain what response would satisfy her. "I did nothing inappropriate," I said finally. "I did not say you did." The sentence landed carefully between us. "But rumors are unfortunate things," she continued. "They grow in small towns, people talk, misunderstandings become stories." The driver checked his watch. She glanced at the building again, taking in the peeling paint near the side door, the faded sign above my head. "It would be a shame," she said quietly, "if something so minor created unnecessary complications." My stomach tightened, though her tone never changed. "I am not looking for complications," I replied. "Good." She straightened her coat sleeve. "I simply wanted to understand who helped my daughter. I prefer to be thorough." "I understand," I said again. For a moment, neither of us moved. The morning traffic began to thicken behind her SUV. The bakery lights flicked on across the street. She turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing," she said without facing me. "It is often wiser to avoid inserting yourself into situations that do not concern you." Then she entered the vehicle. The SUV pulled away slowly, as controlled as her voice had been. I stood in the lot longer than necessary. Nothing she said was an accusation. Nothing she said was a threat. And yet I felt as if I had just been measured and weighed. When I returned inside, the shop seemed smaller. I told myself I was overthinking it. Protective parent, wealthy family. Different worlds colliding for 10 minutes on the side of the road. That should have been the end of it, but the unease did not fade. It settled. The first review appeared 3 days later. It was short, anonymous, 1 star. "Unprofessional behavior, would not recommend." There were no details, no explanation. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. Maybe someone confused my shop with another. Maybe a customer had a bad day. I responded politely online. I invited the reviewer to contact me directly so I could address any concern. There was no reply. By the end of the week, there were 4 more, each one vague. Each one suggesting discomfort. None describing a specific repair. None mentioning a vehicle. The language felt similar, though the usernames were different. I tried to ignore it. Online reviews do not always reflect reality. People exaggerate. Competitors sometimes interfere. It happens. But then my parts supplier called. "We're delaying your next shipment," he said. "Inventory issue." "That's unusual," I replied. "You confirmed it 2 days ago." "I know." Corporate adjusted distribution priorities. "Based on what?" A pause. "Not sure, just instructions." The line went quiet in a way that suggested he knew more than he wanted to say. Without parts, simple repairs stretched into days. Customers grew impatient. I offered apologies and temporary fixes where possible. The second red flag came when a regular client canceled an appointment. "I heard something," he said over the phone. "Probably nothing, just not comfortable right now." Heard what? I asked, a longer pause this time. About you and some young girl. My chest tightened. What about it? I don't know, just that it wasn't appropriate. It was a flat tire, I said carefully. In a public street, 10 minutes. I'm sure, he replied quickly. I just need to think. He never rescheduled. I began checking the shop cameras from the day I helped the girl. The footage was clear. The interaction was brief, professional. She stood several feet away while I worked. We spoke only about the spare tire and driving slowly. There was nothing to hide. Still, the discomfort grew. 2 days later, I received an email from a local business association. They were conducting a routine standards review of member establishments. My shop had never been selected before. Coincidence, I told myself, but patterns were forming. That same afternoon, I noticed the black SUV again, parked farther down the block this time, engine off, windows tinted. It remained for nearly 20 minutes. When I stepped outside, it drove away without signaling. I began to ask quiet questions. The building I rented had changed ownership recently. The landlord had mentioned it in passing. A holding company had acquired several commercial properties in town. I looked up the company name online. It led to a larger corporate structure, one with connections to real estate investments, tech ventures, and philanthropic foundations. The name at the top was hers. The teenage girl's mother, a billionaire with holdings across multiple cities. Suddenly, the delays, the reviews, the subtle shifts felt less random. I printed copies of every online comment. I saved screenshots. I organized invoices and timestamps. I backed up the security footage onto an external drive. I did not accuse anyone. I did not confront anyone, but I stopped assuming coincidence. One afternoon, the suited driver entered the shop alone. He walked slowly around the service bay, observing tools, the lift, the office door. "Can I help you?" I asked. "Just looking," he said calmly. "For what?" "Standards." He left without elaborating. That night, I sat at the small desk in my office long after closing. My son was at home with a neighbor. The shop felt heavier than usual. I replayed the moment on the roadside in my mind, the girls shaking hands, the passing cars, my decision to stop, 10 minutes of help. Now small fractures were appearing around my business. Not loud, not dramatic, but precise. Someone was applying pressure carefully, and I understood something for the first time. This was no longer about a misunderstanding. It was about influence. And influence, when used quietly, does not shout. It rearranges things behind the scenes until the ground beneath you feels unstable. I kept my voice calm with customers. I worked longer hours. I answered every call professionally. But inside, a realization settled. I was being watched, and the person watching had more power than I did. By the second week, the pressure felt organized. Not chaotic, not emotional, organized. The business association scheduled their routine review for Tuesday morning. 2 representatives arrived with clipboards and polite smiles. They checked fire extinguishers, paperwork, employee records, even though I had no employees besides myself. They asked about customer complaints. "Have there been any recent concerns regarding conduct?" One of them asked without looking up from his form. "Not that I've been formally notified about," I replied. He made a small note. They found nothing wrong. Still, the visit lingered in the air long after they left. That afternoon, I requested a meeting with her. I kept it simple. A short email through her company's public contact line. I attached the security footage still frames. I wrote that I wanted clarity, not conflict. To my surprise, her assistant replied within hours. "Ms. Halberg will allow 15 minutes tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. The address was downtown. A glass building I had only seen from a distance. The lobby was quiet, controlled. The receptionist did not smile. I was escorted to a conference room with walls of polished stone. She entered precisely at 10:30. No coat this time. Dark blue suit. No visible impatience. "I understand you're concerned," she began before sitting. "I'm confused," I corrected. "My business is being affected." "By what exactly?" "Reviews, supplier delays, a formal inspection." She folded her hands on the table. "Are you suggesting I'm responsible?" "I'm asking if you are." A pause. "You helped my daughter," she said evenly. "I thanked you for that. You warned me about perception." She tilted her head slightly. "Perception is not a threat, it is reality." I placed printed copies of the online reviews on the table. "These appeared days after you visited. Coincidences happen. The building ownership changed to your holding company. That is public record. We invest widely. My supplier adjusted priorities without explanation." She leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Carter, do you often assume powerful people are focused on you?" The question was calm, almost curious. I assume patterns mean something, I replied. She gave a faint smile. You run a small auto shop. I manage international assets. Do you truly believe I am coordinating efforts to destabilize your business over a flat tire? When she said it that way, it sounded irrational. I believe influence moves quietly, I said. And I believe paranoia grows quietly, she responded. The air in the room felt colder. I am not accusing you publicly, I continued. I am asking you to clarify if there is an issue. There is no issue, she said, unless you create one. Her assistant, seated near the door, finally spoke. Sometimes when rumors circulate, it's wise to address them proactively. A brief public apology for any unintended discomfort could prevent escalation. Apology for what? I asked. For how your assistants may have been perceived. I did nothing wrong. I didn't say you did, she replied gently. The same sentence she had used before. Gaslighting is subtle. It does not deny facts directly. It reframes them until you question your own memory. You're overreacting, she added. If your business is suffering, perhaps there are operational weaknesses unrelated to my family. The implication was clear. I was small, replaceable, defensive. You're suggesting this is my fault, I said quietly. I'm suggesting responsibility begins with self-examination. The meeting ended at exactly 15 minutes. As I walked back to my truck, I felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, doubt. Her words echoed carefully. Was I connecting dots that did not exist? Was I seeing patterns because I felt threatened? But then I remembered the SUV parked down the street, the suited driver walking through my service bay, the timing of every shift. Gaslighting works because it introduces just enough uncertainty. That evening at the grocery store, two people who usually greeted me looked away. At pickup, my son mentioned a boy asking if the police were coming to our house. I kept my voice steady. No, I told him. They are not. But inside, something heavier settled. This was no longer quiet pressure. It was social. Reputation does not collapse loudly. It erodes. And I could feel pieces of mine being worn down, one controlled conversation at a time. The girl came back on a Thursday afternoon. I almost did not recognize her at first. She was wearing a hoodie instead of the pressed blouse she had on that day. No SUV. No driver. She stood just inside the doorway of the garage as if unsure whether she should step farther in. I turned off the engine I was working on. Everything okay with the tire? I asked. She nodded quickly. Yes, it's fine. Silence followed. The shop was empty. The late afternoon light came through the front windows in long streaks. Dust floated in the air between us. I didn't know she would do this, she said finally. Her voice was quieter than before, less composed. Do what? I asked. She looked toward the open garage door, then back at me. My mom thinks everyone is trying to take advantage of me. I didn't, I said calmly. I know. The word came out fast, almost defensive. She asked me questions, the girl continued. About how you looked at me, how close you stood, whether you touched me. I changed your tire, I replied evenly. I told her that. And she said I was naive. The sentence hung in the air. I didn't mean for anything to happen to you, she added. Something in her expression shifted from embarrassment to guilt. What exactly is happening? I asked carefully. She told people you were inappropriate, not directly, just concerned. Concerned, the same word wrapped in different shapes. She thinks men like you, she stopped herself. Like me, I asked. Working class, alone, no one to answer to. There was no cruelty in her tone, just repetition of something she had heard. I felt the weight of that quietly. I have a son, I said. I know. She looked you up. Of course she had. I told her you were respectful, the girl continued. But she said sometimes men behave differently when no one is watching. There were cars passing, I said. It was broad daylight. I know. Her hands were twisting the sleeves of her hoodie now. The confidence she wore at first meeting was gone. I didn't ask her to report anything, she said. But she called the business association, and she spoke to someone who owns your building. The confirmation did not surprise me anymore. It settled like a fact I had already accepted. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because it isn't fair. She glanced toward the street again, as if expecting the black SUV to appear at any moment. I found something, she added quietly. From her bag, she pulled out printed emails, not hers, her mother's assistant's. She laid them on the small metal table beside my tool cabinet. The subject lines were clear. Reputation management strategy. Local vendor pressure. Property lease leverage. My name appeared in the body of one message. Ensure corrective action is taken before rumors escalate. The language was careful, legal, but unmistakable. Why would she keep these where you could find them? I asked. She didn't. I logged into her tablet. She trusts me. The admission carried its own risk. I scanned the pages quickly. They did not contain direct accusations. They did not instruct anyone to fabricate stories. They simply recommended containment and community recalibration. Clean words for messy consequences. She believes she's protecting me, the girl said. At what cost? I asked. She swallowed. I didn't think she would go this far. Neither did I. I walked to the office and pulled up the security footage from the roadside. I replayed it for her. She watched silently. That's it, she said. That's exactly what happened. Would you be willing to say that publicly? I asked. Her expression tightened. She would never forgive me. I'm not asking you to fight her, I said. I'm asking you to confirm the truth. The shop felt smaller again, the air heavier. I don't want you to lose your business because of me, she whispered. You didn't cause this, I replied, but the reality was more complicated. Her mother's influence had already moved through suppliers, property holdings, online spaces, and social networks. This was not an emotional outburst. It was structured. I made copies of the emails while she stood near the door. When she left, she did not look back. For the first time since this began, I had something tangible, not rumors, not patterns, documentation, partial exposure, not enough to stop the pressure, but enough to confirm that I was not imagining it, enough to understand that this was deliberate. And that truth, even when quiet, leaves records behind. The legal notice arrived by certified mail. I signed for it at the front counter while a customer waited for an oil change. The envelope was thick, formal, my name printed in bold across the center. When I opened it, the language was careful but direct. A complaint had been submitted requesting review of my professional conduct and licensing standards. The document did not specify details. It cited community safety concerns and recommended temporary suspension pending investigation. Temporary suspension. Without a license, I could not operate. I folded the letter slowly and finished the oil change before reading it again in the office. The complaint was filed through a private legal firm. The firm represented several corporate entities. One of them was her holding company. The pressure had moved from reputation to structure. That afternoon, my landlord called. There's been a change, he said. New ownership. They're restructuring leases. I know the building was sold, I replied. Well, your monthly rent will increase starting next quarter. How much? He named a number that would erase my profit margin entirely. That's not sustainable, I said. I don't control it anymore, he answered. The new owners are firm. Who are the new owners? He hesitated. You can look it up. I already had the same holding company, the same name at the top. I hung up and sat still for a long time. Escalation does not always look dramatic. It looks like paperwork, policy. Procedure. I called a lawyer that evening. Not someone expensive. Not someone known for courtroom theatrics, just a quiet local attorney who handled contract disputes and property issues. I brought him everything. The reviews, the supplier delays, the building ownership transfer, the emails the girl provided, the legal notice. He read without interrupting. This is strategic, he said finally. I know. They're not accusing you of a crime. They're creating administrative friction. Can they suspend my license? They can request review. That alone disrupts operations. Is it legal? He paused. It's careful. Careful did not mean harmless. What are my options? I asked. You respond formally, provide documentation, demand specifics, and we notify the association that retaliatory influence may be occurring. Will that stop it? It may slow it. I did not sleep much that night. The next morning, 2 customers canceled appointments. One said his wife was uncomfortable bringing the car in. Another said he wanted to wait until things cleared up. By noon, my parts supplier informed me my account was under audit. I felt the walls narrowing. When systems begin reacting, it no longer feels personal. It feels mechanical. You send a form. They send a delay. You respond. They escalate. I gathered every piece of evidence we had. The roadside footage, the time-stamped camera logs, the printed emails. Records of supplier confirmations before delays, the property transfer documents. We submitted a formal response to the legal complaint. Clear, factual, no emotion. We also contacted a local investigative reporter, not with accusations, just documentation. I did not want drama. I wanted record. That evening, the black SUV parked across from the garage again. This time, it did not leave when I stepped outside. The driver remained inside, watching. I stood there longer than usual. We did not exchange words. Power often relies on silence, on the assumption that the person beneath it will fold quietly. Inside the shop, my son was finishing homework at the desk. "Are we in trouble?" he asked without looking up. "No," I said, but my voice felt thinner. Escalation is exhausting because it demands constant composure. If I shouted, I would confirm their narrative. If I reacted publicly, I would appear unstable. So I stayed calm. I kept records. I answered every inquiry professionally. The legal review committee scheduled a hearing date. The reporter confirmed receipt of the documentation but did not promise publication. Everything moved slowly, intentionally slowly. Pressure is more effective when it stretches time. By the end of the week, my bank account reflected the strain: reduced appointments, delayed payments, increased legal fees. I stood in the garage after closing, listening to the echo of my own footsteps. I understood something clearly then. This was not about a flat tire. It was about control. She believed influence should prevent inconvenience, and I had become an inconvenience. But systems, even powerful ones, leave trails, and I had begun collecting them, quietly, without spectacle. Because if I lost everything, I wanted it documented that I had not been reckless. I had simply helped someone who needed help, and that had triggered something far larger than me. The hearing date was set for a Monday morning. I circled it on the calendar in my office, though I already knew it by memory. By then, the strain had shifted from financial to personal. My son came home from school one afternoon quieter than usual. He placed his backpack on the floor and sat at the kitchen table without asking for a snack. "Someone said you hurt a girl," he said finally. The words were flat, repeated, not understood. I felt something inside me tighten in a way no legal notice had managed. "What did you say?" I asked carefully. "I said that's not true." "Did they keep talking?" He shrugged. "They said their parents told them." Rumors travel faster than documentation. I knelt in front of him so we were at eye level. "I did not hurt anyone," I said. "You know that." He nodded. "But children should not have to defend their parents in school hallways." That night after he went to bed, I sat alone in the living room with the lights off. I replayed everything from the beginning. The roadside, the visit, the reviews, the meeting in the glass building, the emails, the legal complaint. At any point, I could have apologized publicly, a vague statement about misunderstanding. It might have calmed the situation, reduced the pressure, but apology implies fault. And fault, once accepted, does not disappear. It becomes record. The lawyer called the next day. "They're requesting temporary suspension pending review," he said. "We can argue against it, but the committee may side with caution." How long would suspension last? 30 days minimum. 30 days without income. 30 days of headlines if the story surfaced the wrong way. I walked through the garage slowly after the call ended. I ran my hand along the edge of the lift. I looked at the worn couch in the waiting area, the small coffee machine that barely worked. This place was not impressive, but it was mine. I began calculating what closure would look like. Selling tools, breaking the lease, moving to another town, starting over quietly where no one knew my name. There was relief in that thought, escape. No more hearings, no more SUV across the street, no more whispers in grocery aisles. But then I imagined my son asking why we left. Because someone powerful decided we were disposable. That was the truth beneath it. I realized something heavier than anger: humiliation. Being treated as if my word carried no weight because my shop was small, because I worked with my hands, because I did not belong to their world of glass buildings and assistants. The girl sent a short message through an email address I had written down for her. "I'm sorry this is happening." I stared at it for a long time. She was still a child inside a system she did not control. This was not her battle. It was mine. The reporter finally called that evening. "We're verifying documents," she said. "If what you've provided holds up, this becomes a corporate influence story, not a misconduct story." "I'm not looking for headlines," I replied. "You may not have that choice." That was the moment I understood fully. This was never about proving innocence. It was about whether truth could survive power. And truth does not shout. It requires patience. The breaking point was not dramatic. I did not yell. I did not throw tools or slam doors. I stood alone in the garage after closing and allowed myself to feel the full weight of it. If I lost the business, I would lose stability for my son. I would lose routine. I would lose the small identity I had rebuilt after grief, all because I stopped for 10 minutes. Tears came without noise, not for injustice alone, but for the exhaustion of carrying composure every day. Then something settled. Clarity. If I closed now, the narrative would remain theirs. If I endured, even at cost, the documentation might outlast the pressure. I chose endurance, not because I felt strong, but because retreat would teach my son something I did not want him to learn. That silence is safer than truth. The hearing was 3 days away. I prepared my documents again, calm, organized, factual. Inside, I had already accepted that I might lose, but I would not apologize for something I did not do. And that decision, quiet as it was, felt like the only thing still fully mine. The article was published the night before the hearing. It did not accuse her directly. It did not defend me emotionally. It presented documentation, property acquisition timelines, supplier correspondence shifts, internal emails referencing containment strategy, security footage, still frames confirming the roadside interaction. The headline was restrained. Local mechanics license review raises questions about corporate influence. By morning, the story had spread beyond our town. Not viral, not sensational, but visible. The hearing room felt different that day. The committee members had copies of the article on the table beside my file. The legal representative who filed the complaint appeared less certain. He requested postponement, pending clarification of external narratives. My lawyer responded calmly. We welcome clarification. The committee chair adjusted his glasses and reviewed the footage once more. Clear, dated, public roadside, no physical contact beyond handing over the tire iron. Is there any direct allegation of misconduct? The chair asked the legal representative. Only community concern, he replied. From whom? He hesitated. The room remained quiet long enough to become uncomfortable. The request for temporary suspension was denied. The review would continue, but my license would remain active. It was not a victory, it was breathing space. Outside the building, reporters waited. I gave a short statement. I provided roadside assistance. I stand by the documentation. Nothing more. That afternoon, my landlord called again. The rent increase has been reconsidered, he said. Market adjustments. No apology, just revision. My parts supplier confirmed shipment release within hours. Online reviews began shifting. Some previous anonymous comments disappeared. Others were buried beneath new ones from long-time customers who had read the article. Still, there was no public statement from her. No acknowledgement. Instead, a brief corporate memo circulated through business media. Our company maintains strict ethical standards and respects due process. Careful words again. But investors pay attention to patterns. Corporate boards notice reputational risk. Within days, another article surfaced. Not about me directly, about her company's history of aggressive reputation management. Former employees spoke anonymously. Small property owners described sudden lease pressure. Nothing illegal, just pressure. Quiet consequence often moves through financial channels. 2 weeks later, it was announced that she would be stepping back temporarily from active oversight to focus on strategic restructuring. The language was controlled, neutral, but the meaning was clear. Influence had limits. The girl did not appear publicly. She did not need to. Her quiet confirmation to the reporter was enough. One afternoon, I saw the black SUV again. It drove past the garage slowly. It did not stop. I stood in the doorway and watched it disappear down the street. There was no satisfaction in that moment, no sense of triumph, only relief that the constant observation had ended. Customers returned gradually, not all at once. Trust, once shaken, rebuilds slowly. Some people avoided eye contact when they came back, embarrassed by how quickly they had believed whispers. I did not mention it. I fixed their cars. The garage sounded normal again. Engines, tools, routine, but something fundamental had shifted. I understood now how fragile reputation can be when someone with resources decides to redirect it. Documentation had protected me. Not anger, not confrontation. Record. Consequences did not arrive dramatically. They arrived in board meetings. In investor calls, in subtle distance from a powerful woman who had miscalculated how visible her influence would become. I returned home that evening and told my son the hearing went well. He nodded as if he had expected that outcome. Children often trust more deeply than adults. The pressure stopped, quietly. And just as quietly, so did the surveillance. The garage never felt exactly the same again. The tools were in the same places. The lift still hesitated before rising. The couch in the waiting area still sagged in the middle. But I noticed things I had not noticed before. How quickly people decide what is true. How easily silence can be filled by someone else's version of events. How fragile ordinary stability really is. Business returned slowly. Not in celebration, not with apologies, just routine. A customer would hand me keys and say, "Glad everything worked out." I would nod. Nothing had worked out. It had simply stopped collapsing. The hearing concluded weeks later with no findings of misconduct. A formal letter confirmed it. Clean language, official seal. I filed it away in a drawer. The girl sent one more message. "Thank you for not blaming me," I replied with a single sentence. "Take care of yourself." There was no further contact. Her mother never spoke to me again. No retraction, no acknowledgement, just absence. Sometimes I wondered whether she believed she had been wrong, or whether she believed the exposure had simply been inconvenient. It no longer mattered. What stayed with me was not anger, it was awareness. Power does not always shout, it adjusts contracts, it nudges suppliers, it rearranges perception. And truth, if it survives, survives because someone preserved it carefully. One evening, as I closed the garage, my son stood beside me holding the lock. "Are we okay now?" he asked. "Yes," I said. And this time it felt true. We were not untouched, but we were steady. I turned off the lights, pulled the shutter down, and listened to the quiet settle over the street. No cameras watching, no SUVs waiting, just the sound of metal cooling after a long day's work. I went home, and the next morning I unlocked the garage again.